For years, an elderly mother lived like a shadow within her own home, suffocated by silence and fear. Everything changed when a forgotten cell phone revealed perverse secrets hidden behind prayers and smiles. On the most unexpected night, she raised her voice in the middle of a worship service, exposing the hypocrisy before the entire congregation. And when the rosary fell to the floor, each bead collected became a symbol of a victory that no one could silence anymore. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Mrs. Marlene woke before sunrise, as she had for over 50 years. The thin mattress creaked as she got up, and her bare feet touched the cold, polished concrete floor of the small back room. That tiny room with a window that barely opened and an old wardrobe leaning against the wall was now her only refuge in the house she had built brick by brick herself. The yellowish light from the street lamp streamed through the gap in the frayed curtain, illuminating the rosary, hanging on the headboard of the bed. Marlene took the rosary beads between her calloused fingers and whispered a Hail Mary before putting on her worn bathrobe. The aroma of coffee did not yet fill the house. That was because she was no longer allowed to make coffee. Patricia, her daughter-in-law, had said her coffee was too weak, that she wasted coffee grounds, that she made a mess in the kitchen. Marlene walked silently down the narrow hallway, avoiding the creaky floorboards. In the last 3 years, she had learned which parts of the floor would betray her presence. The living room was dark, but she knew every piece of furniture by heart. The coffee table she'd bought on sale when Benedict, her son, was still small. The 2-seater sofa she had reupholstered twice. The bookshelf where she kept family photographs, now pushed to the corner by new frames with pictures of Patricia at church events. She reached the kitchen and turned on only the small light above the sink. She couldn't make noise. Patricia and Benedict slept in the main bedroom, and any sound before 7 in the morning was a cause for complaint. Marlene took the stale bread, left over from the previous night's dinner, cut a small piece and ate it standing, looking out the window at the backyard where she used to plant kale, chives and tomatoes. Now the garden bed was abandoned, overgrown with weeds. Everything had changed when Benedict brought Patricia home. At first Marlene had been happy. Her son deserved to be happy, to start a family, to have a companion. Patricia was beautiful, well-spoken, always impeccably dressed. She attended the New Covenant Evangelical Church, one of the largest in the Maplewood Heights district on the outskirts of London. Everyone said she was a blessed woman full of the Holy Spirit, always ready to help her fellow congregants. But Marlene soon realized something was wrong. In the first few months, Patricia would smile at her in Benedict's presence, but when they were alone, the smile disappeared. It started with small, seemingly innocent comments, that the house was old, that it needed renovations, that Marlene could stay in her room more to avoid bothering the couple. Then came the open criticisms, that she ate too much, that she wasted water, that her presence bothered visitors. Benedict at first defended his mother. But Patricia had a special ability to manipulate situations. She would cry, say she wasn't loved, that her mother-in-law rejected her, that she only wanted what was best for the family. Benedict, infatuated and confused, began to give in. First, there were small concessions. Marlene could no longer watch television in the living room after 8 in the evening. Then she was forbidden from receiving visitors without prior notice. Next, she lost the right to use the kitchen freely. The transformation was gradual but relentless. Patricia took complete control of the house. She rearranged the furniture, changed the curtains, painted the walls. Each change erased a little more of Marlene's presence in that space she had called home for decades. The objects that told her story were put away, hidden, discarded. The pots she used to make her baked goods were replaced with new sets. The hand-embroidered dishcloths disappeared. Marlene tried to resist at first. She spoke with Benedict, asked him to see what was happening, but Patricia always had a ready answer, always played the victim, always cried at the right moment. She said Marlene was possessive, that she couldn't accept her son had grown up, that she wanted to control the couple's life. And Benedict, torn between his mother and his wife, chose the easier path. He asked Marlene to be patient, said Patricia was adapting, that things would get better with time. But they didn't get better. They got worse. The doorbell rang at 7:30 in the morning. Marlene, who was already dressed in a simple cotton dress, went to answer. At the door was Irene, her neighbor of many years, holding a bag. "I brought some rolls I made this morning, Mrs. Marlene. I thought of you." Irene entered quickly, looking around as if afraid of being seen. The two went to the small back room where they talked in low voices. Irene was one of the few people who knew the truth. She saw the lights on in Marlene's room late at night, heard the shouts that sometimes escaped through the windows, noticed the bruises Marlene tried to hide with long sleeves even in the heat. "You need to do something, Mrs. Marlene. This can't go on." Marlene shook her head, her eyes welling up. "And what can I do, Irene? Who will believe me? Patricia is respected at church. Everyone thinks she's an angel. If I speak up, they'll say I'm a resentful old woman who can't accept her son's happiness. But you have to try. You have to report it." "Report what?" "She doesn't leave visible marks. The shoves, the pinches, the hair pulling, it's all done where no one sees. And the words, Irene, the words are even worse. She calls me deadweight, useless. Says I should be grateful to still have a roof over my head." Irene held Marlene's hand, squeezing it tightly. "You raised Benedict alone. You worked your fingers to the bone to provide education, food, and clothes for that boy. You took in laundry until your fingers bled. You sold homemade treats at the market, come rain or shine. You sewed late into the night to pay the bills. And now you're being treated like this in your own home?" Marlene wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "I know, Irene, I know everything I did, but it seems none of that matters anymore. Benedict is blind. He only sees what Patricia wants him to see. When we're alone, she's one person. When he arrives, she turns into another. She pretends to treat me well, speaks in a sweet voice, offers help. Benedict believes everything is fine, that I'm just being dramatic." The two remained silent for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of the house waking up. Footsteps in the hallway, the bathroom door closing, Patricia's voice calling Benedict for coffee. Marlene stood up and walked Irene to the door. Before leaving, the neighbor turned and said something that would echo in Marlene's head for the next few days. "One day the truth will come out, Mrs. Marlene. People like Patricia always slip up. They always let their true selves show." When Irene left, Marlene returned to her room and knelt before the small image of the Blessed Mother she kept on her nightstand. She prayed as her mother had taught her, asking for strength, asking for justice, asking for a sign that all of this would end. At that moment, she didn't know that her prayer would be answered in a way she never imagined, that a forgotten device, a curious boy, and Patricia's own arrogance would conspire to change everything, that the truth, hidden for so long, was about to come to light in the most unexpected way. But for now all Marlene knew was that she needed to survive another day, and then another, and another, until something changed, or until her strength completely gave out. Patricia woke to her alarm clock ringing at precisely 7 o'clock. She turned off the device and stretched out on the king-sized bed she had chosen herself when she married Benedict. The main bedroom was spacious, tastefully decorated, with beige linen curtains and a custom-built wardrobe that occupied an entire wall. Nothing there resembled Marlene's old decor. Patricia had made sure to erase any trace of the house's humble past. She got up and went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. At 32, she maintained an impeccable appearance. Her brown hair was always well-groomed, her skin cared for, her clothes discreet, yet elegant, the perfect image of a devout Christian woman. No one would suspect that behind that angelic smile existed a cold and calculating heart. After getting ready, she went to the kitchen where Benedict was already having coffee. He was in uniform, ready for another day as a bus driver. Patricia kissed the top of her husband's head and poured herself some coffee. "Good morning, my love. Did you sleep well?" Benedict nodded, chewing a piece of buttered bread. "I did. And you?" "Very well. Today will be a busy day. I have a meeting with the church women's group in the morning. Then I'm going to visit Sister Helen, who is ill, and in the afternoon I'm helping to organize the charity bazaar." Patricia spoke enthusiastically about her religious activities. She was a leader in the women's ministry of the New Covenant Evangelical Church, coordinated the distribution of food hampers for needy families, organized events, and was always the first to volunteer for any work. Pastor Joshua always praised her publicly, saying she was an example of faith and dedication. "You work too much at church, Patricia. You need to rest too." She smiled, touching Benedict's hand tenderly. "It's not work, my love. It's a mission. God called me to serve, and I serve with joy. But you're right, I need to take better care of myself, and of you too. We need some time just for us, don't you think?" Benedict agreed, but his gaze drifted to the hallway leading to his mother's room. "How is my mother?" The question made Patricia suppress a look of irritation. She knew she needed to choose her words carefully. Benedict could be manipulated, but he still loved his mother. The trick was to make him think everything was fine, that any problem was Marlene's exaggeration or a misunderstanding. "Your mother is fine, Benedict. We talked a little yesterday. She even helped me fold some clothes. I think she's getting more used to our routine." It was a lie. Marlene hadn't helped with anything because Patricia didn't allow it, but Benedict believed it, as he always did. He wanted to believe. It was easier that way, more comfortable to think his mother was fine than to face the truth hidden within his own home. "That's good. I'm happy you two are getting along better." Patricia smiled inwardly. She had Benedict in the palm of her hand. He was predictable, manipulable, a meek lamb who did everything she wanted as long as it was wrapped in tears or affection. At the beginning of their relationship, she had even felt something for him. Benedict was hard-working, honest, didn't drink or smoke. But what truly attracted Patricia was the house. Her own house, fully paid for, well located in Maplewood Heights. It would be worth a lot of money if sold. And that was the part of the plan Benedict didn't know. Patricia hadn't married for love. She married for interest, the house, the stability, the respectability that came with being married. But Marlene was an obstacle. As long as the old woman was there, Patricia wouldn't have total control, and she hated not having control. After Benedict left for work, Patricia picked up her cell phone and checked her messages. She had several from the church group, some prayer requests, invitations to events. She replied to all with Bible verses and words of encouragement. Then, she opened a private conversation with Lucy, her only true friend, the only person who knew her true face. "I need to talk to you. I have news." Lucy replied almost immediately. "Tell me, what happened?" Patricia looked around, making sure she was alone, and began to type. "I managed to convince Benedict to think about selling the house. I said we could buy something bigger, in a better neighborhood. He's still hesitating because of the old woman, but it's only a matter of time." "And what will you do with your mother-in-law?" Patricia smiled, her fingers typing rapidly. "I have everything planned. I'll convince him to put her in a nursing home. I've already researched some cheap places far from here. I'll say it's for her own good, that she needs special care, that we're too old to take care of her. Benedict will resist at first, but I know how to make him change his mind." "You're terrible, Patricia. What if she tells someone? Who will believe her? I'm a leader at church. Everyone loves me. If she says anything, I'll say she has mental problems, that she's confused because of her age. I've already started planting that seed. Last week I mentioned to some church sisters that Mrs. Marlene has been forgetful, confused. Everyone believed it." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with Patricia detailing her plans. Sell the house, put Marlene in a nursing home, use the money to travel through Europe, something she had always dreamed of. Benedict wouldn't even need to know everything. She knew how to manipulate him, knew exactly what to say and when to say it. At 9 o'clock, Patricia put her cell phone in her purse and left for the church meeting. The New Covenant Evangelical Church was 3 blocks away. It was a large building painted white with a luminous sign and a full parking lot on Sundays. Pastor Joshua led the congregation with a firm hand, and his wife, Mrs. Constance, coordinated the women's ministries with Patricia. Upon entering the church, Patricia was greeted with smiles and hugs. The sisters greeted her warmly, asked for advice, shared problems. Patricia listened attentively, offered words of comfort, prayed with those who needed it. She was a perfect actress, playing the role of a pious woman with mastery. During the women's ministry meeting, they discussed the organization of a special event that would take place next month. A service honoring the women of the church with testimonies, worship songs, and a special message from the pastor. Patricia was chosen to be one of the main organizers. She accepted the mission with feigned humility, saying it was an honor to serve. After the meeting, some women stayed to chat in the church courtyard. Patricia took the opportunity to reinforce the narrative she was building about Marlene. "I'm worried about my mother-in-law, sisters. She's been so forgetful. Sometimes she confuses things, says senseless words. Benedict and I are thinking of seeking specialized help." The women showed concern and offered prayers. One of them, Mrs. Teresa, suggested that perhaps it was old age. Patricia agreed, saying it was difficult to see someone age like that, but that she and Benedict were doing their best to take good care of Marlene. "You are a blessed daughter-in-law, Patricia. Not everyone would have such patience." Patricia lowered her head modestly. "It's the least I can do. After all, Mrs. Marlene raised my husband. She deserves all our respect and care." The words flowed sweetly from her mouth, but inside her there was only contempt. Marlene was a hindrance, an obstacle that needed to be removed. And Patricia was determined to remove that obstacle as efficiently as possible. When she returned home in the early afternoon, she found Marlene sitting in the backyard, looking at the abandoned garden bed. The old woman looked so fragile, so defeated. For a brief moment, Patricia almost felt something akin to pity, but the feeling quickly passed, replaced by her usual irritation. "What are you doing out there? Don't you have anything to do?" Marlene looked up and Patricia saw a deep sadness in her eyes, but she also saw something else, a spark of resistance that had not yet completely died out, and that bothered Patricia more than she cared to admit. "I was just getting some sun." "Well then, come inside right away. I don't want the neighbors seeing you sprawled out there as if you're abandoned. What will they think of me?" Marlene slowly stood up and walked into the house. Patricia followed her with her gaze, satisfied with her own authority. Soon that house would be hers alone. Soon Marlene would be just an annoying memory, and she, Patricia, could finally live the life she had, always desired, without dead weight to carry. But fate, as she would soon discover, had other plans, and sometimes arrogance and overconfidence are the seeds of one's own downfall. Gabriel was a 12-year-old boy, son of Mrs. Clara, who lived 3 houses down the same street. He was a bright, curious boy, always riding his bike around the neighborhood, making small deliveries to earn a few coins. He had known Mrs. Marlene since he was little and had always liked her. The old woman used to give him homemade treats when he passed by, and always had a kind word. That Thursday afternoon, Gabriel was playing ball in the empty lot next to Marlene's house when the ball landed in her backyard. He jumped the low wall, retrieved the ball, and was about to leave when he saw something shining near the wash basin. It was a cell phone, a nice device with a pink case forgotten on a plastic bench. Gabriel picked up the cell phone and looked around. There was no one in the backyard. He knew he should return it, but the device's screen lit up with a notification, and something caught his attention. It was an unheard audio message. Out of curiosity, he tapped the icon. The voice that came from the device was Patricia's, Mrs. Marlene's daughter-in-law. Gabriel knew that voice from the times he saw her on the street, always so polite, always smiling. But what he heard was anything but polite. "After the fool signs the house sale, we'll dump the old woman in that cheap nursing home you recommended. She's a complete nuisance, Lucy. I can't stand pretending to care anymore. If she makes a fuss, just say she has mental problems. No one will believe her anyway. Everyone at church thinks, I'm a saint." Gabriel's eyes widened. He kept listening, and the more he heard, the more shocked he became. There were other audios. In one of them, Patricia laughed, mocking the church services, saying it was all theater, that she pretended to cry during prayers to impress others. In another audio, she talked about embezzling money from church donations to buy expensive clothes and cosmetics. The boy stood there, not knowing what to do. This was serious. Very serious. Mrs. Marlene was a good person, and that woman was planning to do terrible things to her. He needed to tell someone. But who? Mrs. Marlene herself. Gabriel put the cell phone in his shorts pocket and went home. He found his mother in the kitchen preparing lunch. "Mum, I need to talk to you. It's important." Mrs. Clara put down her wooden spoon and looked at her son with concern. "What is it, Gabriel? You're pale." The boy told her everything. He showed her the cell phone, explained where he found it, and made his mother listen to some parts of the audios. Mrs. Clara remained silent, her face growing more serious as she listened. When the audios finished, she took the cell phone from her son's hands and placed it on the table. "This is very serious, Gabriel, very serious indeed. Patricia is a leader at church. Everyone trusts her. And Mrs. Marlene, poor woman, has always seemed so sad lately. Now I understand why." "What do we do, Mom?" Mrs. Clara thought for a moment. Then she picked up the cell phone again and began to explore the device. She found more messages, more audios, entire conversations that revealed Patricia's true nature. There were messages mocking church members, cruel comments about Benedict, detailed plans to get rid of Marlene and keep the money from the house sale. "We need to warn Mrs. Marlene. She has the right to know what's happening. But we have to be careful. If Patricia discovers she lost her phone and that we found these messages, she might invent a story. She might delete everything." Mrs. Clara was a retired teacher, an intelligent and practical woman. She knew they needed proof. She took her own cell phone and began to record the audios on Patricia's device. Then she asked Gabriel to find an old USB drive she had in a drawer. She transferred all. The important files, all the incriminating conversations, everything that could be used as evidence. "Now let's return this cell phone before she realizes it's missing. You'll put it back exactly where you found it, and then we'll talk to Mrs. Marlene." Gabriel obeyed. He returned to Marlene's backyard, made sure no one was looking, and placed the cell phone back on the plastic bench. Then he ran back home. An hour later, Mrs. Clara and Gabriel went to Marlene's house. They knocked on the back door, the entrance that led directly to the small room where Marlene lived. The old woman opened it, surprised by the visit. "Mrs. Clara, Gabriel, what a pleasant surprise. Come in, come in." The three sat in the small room. Mrs. Clara went straight to the point. She told her about the cell phone, about what Gabriel had heard, about the recordings they had made. Marlene listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. When her neighbor finished speaking, the old woman covered her face with her hands and sobbed. "I knew she was bad, but I didn't imagine it was this bad. I knew." Mrs. Clara held Marlene's hands firmly. "You can't let this continue. You have to face this situation. You have to show your son who this woman really is." "How? He won't believe me. He believes her, everything she says. That's why we have the recordings. They are proof. Her voice, her words. There's no denying it. But she'll say I made it up, that I manipulated the audio. Who knows what she'll invent?" Mrs. Clara shook her head. "Not if you use this evidence the right way. It's no use just showing it to Benedict. He might side with her, might try to cover it up. You need to expose this publicly in front of witnesses in a way she can't deny or hide." "How?" Gabriel, who had been quiet until then, spoke for the first time. "At church, Mrs. Marlene. You have to show this at church, in front of everyone. My mom took me there a few times. I know there are a lot of people who respect you and who know Patricia. If everyone knows the truth at the same time, she won't be able to lie." Marlene looked at the boy, then at Mrs. Clara. The idea was terrifying. To expose her pain, her humiliation, her situation in front of an entire congregation. But perhaps it was the only way to bring the truth to light in a way that couldn't be suppressed or distorted. "I'm scared. Very scared." "I know you are, Mrs. Marlene, but you have to choose. Either you continue living like this, suffering in silence, until this woman gets what she wants and puts you in a nursing home, far from everything and everyone, or you face this head-on, even with fear, and fight for what is rightfully yours." Marlene remained silent for a long time. Her eyes swept over the cramped room that was now her only space in that house. She thought of everything she had built, everything she had sacrificed for her son, how many times she had gone to bed hungry to ensure Benedict had food on his plate. She thought of the daily humiliations, the insults, the shoves, Patricia's constant contempt. She also thought of her mother, who had faced so many battles in life and had taught her never to give up. The rosary she had inherited from her hung on the headboard of the bed, a silent witness to so many nights of prayer and tears. "I'll do it, I'll face it, but I need time to prepare, I need courage." Mrs. Clara smiled, squeezing her friend's hands once more. "We will help you. You are not alone. And as for courage, you already have it. Surviving what you have survived is proof of that. Now you just need to use that courage to take the final step." Gabriel handed the USB drive to Marlene, explaining that it contained all the evidence she needed. The old woman put the small object in an old sewing box, hidden among threads and buttons. Then, the three made a plan. The special service honoring women would take place in 3 weeks. It was the perfect occasion. There would be many people, the church would be full, and Patricia would be there, triumphant, in the role of organizer and exemplary leader. It would be there, on that stage she used for her farce, that Marlene would reveal the truth. In the following weeks, Marlene prepared. She gathered documents, old photographs of the house, medical records showing the bruises and injuries she had suffered. She wrote a letter, telling her story in detail, explaining everything she had lived through in recent years. Mrs. Clara helped her review the text, making it clear and objective. Irene was also involved in the plan. The oldest neighbor agreed to help discreetly distribute copies of the letter on the church pews before the service. It would be an anonymous letter at first, to pique people's curiosity and attention. Only later would Marlene reveal herself as the author. 3 weeks passed slowly. Marlene prayed every day, asking for strength. Patricia, oblivious to everything, continued her life of appearances, planning every detail of the special service, unaware that the event would become the stage for her own downfall. The Sunday of the special service dawned with a blue sky and strong sun. Marlene woke before 5 in the morning, her stomach churning with nervousness. She had barely slept during the night, mentally rehearsing what she would say, imagining the reactions, fearing failure. But she could no longer turn back. The USB drive was in her purse, along with the documents and photographs. The letter was ready, reviewed for the 10th time the night before. She got up and went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror. Her face showed the signs of suffering, deep dark circles, wrinkles that seemed to have deepened in recent years, a tired gaze. But there was also something new there, a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She put on the navy blue dress she had sewn herself years ago. It was simple but dignified. She placed the rosary around her neck, the one her mother had given her and which she had carried for decades. Each bead had a story, a prayer, a tear. Today, it would be her armor. When she left her room, Patricia and Benedict were already in the living room dressed for church. Patricia wore an elegant white dress, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun, soft makeup, the image of purity and devotion. Seeing Marlene dressed up, she frowned. "Are you going somewhere?" Marlene took a deep breath before answering. "I'm going to church, to the special service." Patricia exchanged a look with Benedict. It was rare for Marlene to leave the house, and even rarer for her to go to church without being invited. "I didn't know you were going, Mother. Do you want me to save you a seat?" Benedict seemed genuinely happy with the idea. Patricia, on the other hand, was not at all pleased, but she disguised it with a forced smile. "What a blessing to have you with us, Mrs. Marlene. It will be a beautiful service." Marlene merely nodded. The three left together, walking through the streets of Maplewood Heights to the church. Mrs. Clara and Gabriel were already there, as was Irene. The 3 women exchanged discreet glances. Everything was prepared. The New Covenant Evangelical Church was packed. More than 200 people filled the pews, waiting for the service to begin. Marlene followed Benedict and Patricia to the front, pews, where the couple's family always sat, but discreetly veered off to the back pews. She wanted to be far away, at least at first. Benedict seemed confused but didn't argue. The service began with worship songs. The choir sang emotional songs about faith, hope, and forgiveness. Patricia was on stage, coordinating everything with her usual efficiency. She smiled, greeted people, distributed leaflets with the program. She was the perfect hostess for the event she herself had organized. During the worship songs, Irene and Mrs. Clara discreetly circulated through the church, placing copies of the anonymous letter on the pews. Some people picked them up and started reading while singing. Others saved them to read later. The letter was unsigned, just a first-person account of an elderly woman suffering abuse in her own home, committed by a daughter-in-law who pretended to be a devout Christian. Pastor Joshua ascended the pulpit and began the special message. He spoke about the importance of women in faith, about biblical matriarchs, about how God honors those who serve with true love. The irony was not lost on Marlene. There was the pastor speaking about true love while one of the biggest hypocrites in the congregation sat in the front row, smiling as if she were the very personification of virtue. After the message, it was time for testimonies. Several women from the church went up to the stage to share testimonies of faith, of overcoming challenges, of how God had acted in their lives. Patricia would be the last to speak, the culminating moment of the event. It was then that Marlene stood up. The movement was so unexpected that it caught the attention of several people. An elderly woman coming from the back pews walking down the central aisle towards the altar. "Pastor," Joshua paused, surprised. Patricia, who was about to go up, froze. "Excuse me, Pastor. I would like to give my testimony as well." Marlene's voice trembled a little, but it was firm enough to be heard by everyone. The pastor hesitated, looked at Patricia, who made a discreet signal indicating she didn't know that woman. But Mrs. Constance, the pastor's wife and ministry coordinator, intervened. "Of course, my sister. Please come up. Everyone is welcome to testify." Marlene slowly climbed the altar steps. Her legs trembled, her heart pounded so hard she feared everyone could hear it. When she reached the pulpit, she looked at the congregation. So many familiar faces, people from the neighborhood, neighbors, long-time church members. And there in front, Patricia, with an expression that mixed confusion and irritation. Beside her, Benedict, completely lost. Marlene took the pages of the letter she had written from her purse and held them with both hands. Then she began to speak. "My name is Marlene Santos. I have lived in Maplewood Heights for over 50 years. I raised my son alone, worked day and night to give him everything I didn't have. I took in laundry until my fingers bled. I sold homemade treats at the market, come rain or shine. I sewed late into the night to pay the bills. I built a house brick by brick with my own hands and my own sweat. That house was my home, my refuge, my legacy for my son." The church was in absolute silence. All attention was on the elderly woman in the navy blue dress and rosary around her neck. But 3 years ago, my home stopped being my home. My son got married, and his wife, little by little, turned me into an intruder in my own house. I was pushed into a small back room. I lost the right to use my own kitchen. I was forbidden from sitting at the table for meals. I was called dead weight, useless, a nuisance. I was pushed, pinched, humiliated every day. And all of this done by a woman who is here today, sitting among you, respected and admired as an example of Christian faith. A murmur ran through the congregation. Some people began to shift in their seats, uncomfortable. Patricia stood up, her face red. "This is an absurd lie. Pastor, this woman is confused. She doesn't know. What's she saying?" Marlene was not shaken. She continued, her voice now firmer. "I am the author of the letter that many of you received today. I wrote every word, recounted every humiliation. For years I kept silent, for love of my son, for shame of exposing my pain, for fear of not being believed. Because who would believe me against a woman so involved with the church, so pious, so respected?" Pastor Joshua tried to intervene, but Mrs. Constance held his arm, asking him to let the woman finish. There was something in that testimony that could not be interrupted. But God, in his infinite wisdom, showed me that silence only protects oppressors, and he gave me an opportunity to reveal the truth. This person, whom everyone admires, who leads prayers and organizes events, planned to put me in a cheap nursing home and sell my house to travel through Europe. She planned to convince my son that I am crazy, that I have mental problems so that no one would believe me. And all this while pretending to care for me, while pretending to be a loving daughter-in-law." Patricia shouted again, trying to deny it, but her voice was drowned out by the growing murmurs of the congregation. Benedict was paralyzed, his face pale, not understanding what was happening. Marlene signaled to the young woman from the choir who operated the sound system. The young woman, who was already prepared, connected the USB drive to the computer. A click, and the entire church was filled with the sound of Patricia's voice. "After the fool signs the house sale, we'll dump the old woman in that cheap nursing home. She's a complete nuisance, Lucy. I can't stand pretending to care anymore. If she makes a fuss, just say she has mental problems. No one will believe her anyway. Everyone at church thinks I'm a saint." The impact was devastating. People stood up from the pews. Some cried. Others expressed indignation. Pastor Joshua turned red with anger. Mrs. Constance put her hand to her mouth, shocked. But no one was more shocked than Benedict, who turned to Patricia with wide eyes, as if seeing a stranger. The audio continued to play through the church. More excerpts were reproduced, Patricia mocking the services, saying she fake cried during prayers to impress people. Patricia laughing at congregation members, calling them naive. Patricia confessing that she embezzled money from donations to buy clothes and cosmetics. Every word that came from the loudspeakers was like a bomb exploding within that sacred space. Patricia tried to run towards the sound system to turn it off, but several people stopped her. Mrs. Constance, who had always been her mentor and supporter, stood in front of her with an expression of deep disappointment. "Don't you dare! Let everyone hear." The pastor's wife's voice was cold as ice. Patricia began to cry, but they were not tears of repentance. They were tears of anger, of frustration at being discovered, at seeing her perfect plan collapsing before her eyes. Benedict was sitting in the pew, his head in his hands. His entire world was collapsing. The woman he loved, whom he trusted, whom he had defended even when his mother had tried to show him the truth, now revealed herself as a complete stranger. A liar, a manipulator, a cruel person. When the audios finished, Marlene continued her testimony. She took medical documents from her purse showing the bruises, contusions, and injuries she had suffered over the years. She showed old photographs of the house, proving that the property was hers, built with her labor. She presented letters written in the early hours of the morning, records of difficult days, concrete evidence of everything she had claimed. The congregation was in a state of shock. Some women cried openly. Men shook their heads in disbelief. Pastor Joshua had to ask for silence several times to calm tempers. It was then that Patricia made the fatal mistake. She lost control, lost her composure, completely lost the mask she had worn for so many years. She got up from the pew where she was sitting, pushed anyone in her way, and went up to the altar. Her eyes were fixed on Marlene with pure, distilled hatred. There were no more excuses, no more manipulative tears. There was only rage. "You filthy old woman! You ruined everything, everything!" Before anyone could react, Patricia raised her hand and delivered a violent slap to Marlene's face. The sound echoed through the silent church. The force of the blow made the old woman stagger. The rosary around her neck broke, and the beads scattered across the altar floor, rolling in all directions. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one breathed. Everyone was paralyzed by the shocking scene they had just witnessed. Marlene brought her hand to her stinging face. Then, with a calm that surprised everyone, she knelt. She began to collect the rosary beads, one by one, in silence. Her hands trembled, but she continued. Each bead she picked up was carefully placed in the palm of her other hand. The image was devastating. An elderly woman, just publicly assaulted, kneeling on the church floor, collecting her broken rosary while her aggressor stood, panting with rage. Several people took out their cell phones and began to film. That scene would be seen by thousands, perhaps millions of people in the coming hours. It was Mrs. Constance who broke the silence. She went up to the altar, knelt beside Marlene, and began to help her collect the beads. Then other women did the same. In a few minutes, there were a dozen people kneeling on the floor in solidarity with the old woman who had suffered in silence for so long. Patricia looked around and realized the gravity of what she had just done. She tried to retreat, tried to invent an excuse, but there was no turning back. Her own mother, Mrs. Regina, who was present in the congregation and was one of the most respected women in the church, stood up and walked towards her daughter. "What have you done, Patricia? What have you become?" Mrs. Regina's voice trembled with disappointment. She took her daughter by the arm and pulled her away from the altar, but Patricia violently pulled away. "Don't touch me! No one touches me! You don't understand anything! That old woman is a manipulator! She set all this up! She wants to destroy me!" Pastor Joshua finally intervened, his voice thundering through the church. "Enough! Patricia, you have just shown everyone here your true face. Assaulting an elderly woman in the house of God before the entire congregation. There is no excuse, no justification. From this moment on, you are removed from any leadership position in this church, and you will be investigated for all the accusations made against you." Patricia tried to argue, but her voice was swallowed by the indignant murmurs of the congregation. Several people shouted, demanding justice, demanding that she be expelled. The atmosphere was becoming dangerous, and the pastor had to ask for calm several times. Benedict finally reacted. He stood up and walked to the altar where his mother was still kneeling, surrounded by people helping her. He knelt in front of her, tears streaming down his face. "Mother, forgive me. Forgive me for not believing you. Forgive me for being blind. Forgive me for letting this happen." Marlene looked at her son. She saw in him the boy she had raised, unconditionally loved, protected with her own life. But she also saw the man who had abandoned her, who had chosen the comfort of lies instead of the pain of truth. "Forgiveness is given, my son, but trust will be rebuilt, bead by bead, like this rosary." Marlene's words hit Benedict like a punch. He bowed his head, knowing he deserved that answer. Forgiveness was given, but the path back would be long and difficult. Meanwhile, Patricia was led out of the church by her own mother and some deacons. She screamed, accused, tried to defend herself, but no one listened to her anymore. The mask had completely fallen, and there was no way to retrieve it. The service ended abruptly. Pastor Joshua asked everyone to calm down, to pray for wisdom and discernment, not to let that episode shake their faith. But everyone knew that nothing would be the same. The New Covenant Evangelical Church had just witnessed one of the most shocking scandals in its history. Marlene was surrounded by people who wanted to hug her, console her, apologize for not having noticed her suffering before. Mrs. Clara and Gabriel were there, along with Irene and several other women from the neighborhood. All cried, all offered support. In the midst of that confusion, Marlene tightly held the handful of rosary beads she had managed to collect. They were not all of them. Some had rolled into impossible corners, but they were enough. Enough to rebuild, enough to start over. Because if there was one thing Marlene had learned in her 70-plus years of life, it was this. No matter how many times you fall, no matter how many times you are broken, what matters is that you get up, you pick up the pieces, and you rebuild. Bead by bead, brick by brick, day by day. In the following hours, videos of the assault began to circulate on social media. The image of Marlene kneeling, collecting her rosary after being assaulted, went viral. Thousands of people shared, commented, expressed indignation and solidarity. The story of the woman who did not fall, of the woman who faced her oppressor even with fear, of the woman who spoke the truth even knowing the consequences, began to spread across the country. And with that story came justice. A justice that Marlene had not sought, but which arrived nonetheless. Because sometimes, when you refuse to be silenced, the whole world listens. And when the whole world listens, not even the most powerful can hide the truth. The days following the church scandal were intense and transformative. Marlene's story resonated nationally. Newspapers, television programs, news websites, all wanted to tell the story of the elderly woman who confronted her oppressor in a religious service. Her image, kneeling, collecting the rosary beads, became a symbol of resistance and dignity. Marlene woke up the following Monday to dozens of people at her doorstep, journalists, church members, neighbors, people she had never seen before. Everyone wanted to talk to her, offer support, ask for interviews. Her neighbor Irene and Mrs. Clara took on the role of protecting her, organizing who could enter and who needed to wait. Inside the house, the situation was tense. Patricia had left on Sunday itself after the service, taking only a few clothes. She had gone to her mother's house, but even there she found no solace. Mrs. Regina, ashamed and outraged by her daughter's actions, made it clear that Patricia would have to face the consequences of her deeds. Benedict was devastated. He had spent the entire night awake, processing everything he had discovered. The woman he had married, who said she loved him, had revealed herself to be a complete stranger. He sat at the kitchen table on Monday morning, looking at his mother who was preparing coffee, and couldn't hold back the tears. "Mother, how did I let this happen? How was I so blind?" Marlene placed a cup of coffee in front of her son and sat beside him. It was the first time in years that she had sat at her own kitchen table again. "You loved her, Benedict. Love sometimes makes us see only what we want to see. She was good at that, at showing one face when you were around and another when you weren't. But you tried to warn me so many times, and I didn't listen. I chose to believe her instead of believing my own mother." Benedict's regret was genuine, but Marlene knew that the path to reconciliation would be long. It wasn't enough to apologize. It was necessary to rebuild the trust that had been broken, to prove with actions, and not just with words, that he was truly changed. Meanwhile, the New Covenant Evangelical Church began an internal investigation. Pastor Joshua formed a special committee to investigate all the accusations against Patricia. The church accounts were audited, and it was discovered that she had indeed embezzled money from donations. They were not huge amounts, but enough to characterize misappropriation. Collection documents were compared with bank records, and it became evident that Patricia had falsified receipts and financial reports. The embezzled money was used for personal purchases, expensive clothes, cosmetics, dinners at sophisticated restaurants, all while she preached humility and material detachment. The congregation was shocked by the discoveries. Many people who trusted Patricia, who admired her as a spiritual leader, felt betrayed. Some even questioned their own faith, wondering how they could have been deceived for so long. Pastor Joshua had to hold several special counseling and healing services, helping members process the collective trauma. Patricia was officially expelled from the church. Her name was removed from the membership roll, and she was forbidden from participating in any congregational activities. In addition, the church decided to press charges against her for embezzlement. The case went to the police station, and Patricia had to answer for her actions before the law. Mrs. Regina, Patricia's mother, personally came to apologize to Marlene. The elderly woman was visibly shaken, ashamed of her daughter's actions. "Mrs. Marlene, I have no words to express my shame. I raised Patricia in the church, taught her Christian values, showed her the path of honesty and love. I don't know where I went wrong. I don't know how she became what she became." Marlene received Mrs. Regina kindly, offered coffee, and sat down to talk with her. "You are not to blame, Mrs. Regina. Each person makes their own choices. Patricia chose the path of lies and wickedness. That is not a reflection of you." "But I should have noticed. I should have seen the signs." "No one saw Mrs. Regina. She was too good at pretending. She deceived all of us." The two women talked for hours, sharing pain, disappointment, but also hope that the truth would bring healing. Mrs. Regina promised she would do everything possible for Patricia, to take responsibility for her actions and seek help. Meanwhile, Marlene's house began to undergo transformations. Benedict, determined to correct his mistakes, started a renovation. He returned the main bedroom to his mother, redid the backyard garden bed, restored the old furniture that Patricia had discarded. Each action was a way of asking for forgiveness, of showing that he recognized his mistake and wanted to repair it. Marlene observed everything with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. She was happy that her son had finally seen the truth, but she knew that rebuilding trust would take time. She would not be naive again. She would not blindly trust again without that trust being earned. One day, during lunch, Benedict brought up an important matter. "Mother, I want to register the house in your name. I want to ensure that no one can ever threaten to take it from you again. This house is yours. It always has been." I will arrange all the documentation." Marlene looked at her son, surprised. "Are you sure about this, Benedict?" "Absolutely. It's the least I can do. You built this house, fought for it. I have no right to it whatsoever." Furthermore, Benedict went to a lawyer to make the house an inalienable asset, ensuring it could not be sold or mortgaged without Marlene's express authorization. It was a legal protection that would give the elderly woman peace of mind for the rest of her days. Meanwhile, Marlene began to receive invitations to speak at events, give interviews, and participate in programs about elder rights. Her story had inspired thousands of people, especially women and elderly individuals who suffered in silence from situations of abuse and domestic violence. Mrs. Clara suggested that Marlene create a support group for seniors in the neighborhood, a space where people going through similar situations could meet, share experiences, seek help and guidance. The idea was embraced by several people in the community, and within a few weeks the group already had over 20 participants. The meetings took place at Marlene's house, which was now open again to receive people. The space that was once a source of pain transformed into a place of welcome and healing. Marlene led the conversations, shared her story, listened to the stories of others. She discovered that she was not alone, that many people faced similar situations. One of the group participants was Mrs. Tess, an 80-year-old woman who lived with her daughter and son-in-law. She reported that she suffered neglect, was left alone for days, did not receive adequate food or medical care. With the group's support and Marlene's guidance, Mrs. Tess was able to report the situation and was taken in by a niece who lived in another city. Another case was that of Mr. George, a 75-year-old widower who lived with his son and daughter-in-law. They treated him like a servant, making him cook, clean, and care for his grandchildren without any consideration. Mr. George, encouraged by the group, confronted the situation and set clear boundaries. When he was not respected, he decided to live alone in a small apartment, preferring solitude to humiliation. Marlene realized that her suffering had a greater purpose. By exposing her pain, by breaking the silence, she had created a path for others to also liberate themselves. Her courage inspired courage in others. The young woman from the church choir who had operated the sound on the day of the revelation also approached Marlene. Her name was Juliana. She was 23 years old and studied social work. Impressed by Marlene's story, she proposed creating a larger project, a center for support and legal guidance for women and elderly victims of domestic violence. The idea was ambitious, but Juliana was determined. She began to seek donations, talk with volunteer lawyers, mobilize the community. Marlene enthusiastically supported the project, offering her own home as a starting point until they could secure a larger space. In a few weeks, the project gained momentum. Local business owners donated construction materials. Lawyers offered to provide free consultation. Psychologists volunteered a few hours a week for counseling. The New Covenant Evangelical Church, seeking to redeem itself from the scandal, offered an unused annex hall. The Mrs. Marlene Support Center was inaugurated 2 months after the church scandal. It was a simple but welcoming space, with rooms for consultations, a small library with books on elder rights, and a common area where people could have coffee and chat. 6 months had passed since that Sunday that changed everything. Winter had arrived in London, bringing cold mornings and sunny afternoons. Marlene woke up early, as she always did, but now there was no more fear or anguish. She got up from her main bedroom, the one she had decorated herself decades ago, and which was finally hers again. The white lace curtains she had embroidered were still there, lovingly washed and ironed by her own hands. She went to the kitchen and made coffee. The aroma filled the house, bringing back memories of better times, of when Benedict was a child and they would have coffee together before he went to school. Now, in a way, they were rebuilding those moments. Not in the same way, because the past doesn't return, but in a new, more mature, more conscious way. Benedict had moved into a small rented apartment near his mother's house. He visited daily, helped with chores, talked, but respected Marlene's space. He understood that regaining his mother's trust required patience, humility, and consistent actions, and he was willing to do whatever it took. Benedict and Patricia's divorce was underway. Patricia had tried to contest it, tried to extract something from the process, but was unsuccessful. The house was registered in Marlene's name as an inalienable asset, and Benedict did not possess other valuable assets. Patricia would be left only with her personal belongings and the consequences of her actions. The criminal case against her was also progressing. The evidence of embezzlement from the church was irrefutable. Her lawyer had tried to argue that they were small amounts, that she had emotional problems, but the judge was inflexible. Patricia would have to return the money, perform community service, and would still face legal restrictions. Furthermore, her reputation was destroyed. No one in the neighborhood, nor in the wider religious community, wanted association with her. Mrs. Regina, Patricia's mother, had visited Marlene a few times over these months. The two had developed an improbable friendship, united by the pain of having been deceived by the same person. Regina had confided that Patricia had always been problematic, but she had hoped that marriage and the church would transform her. It hadn't happened, and now Regina was helping her daughter rebuild her life from scratch, this time with honesty. On that Saturday morning, Marlene had a special day ahead. The Mrs. Marlene Support Center was celebrating 6 months of operation, and there would be a small celebration. The center had already served over 100 people, offering legal guidance, psychological support, and a safe space for elderly individuals and women suffering domestic violence. Juliana, the young woman from the choir, had become the center's coordinator. She worked tirelessly, always with energy and enthusiasm, always believing that it was possible to make a difference. Marlene saw in her a young version of herself, determined, courageous, willing to fight for others. At 10 o'clock, Marlene arrived at the center, accompanied by Benedict, Mrs. Clara, Gabriel, and Irene. The hall was decorated with colorful banners, balloons, and tables full of homemade treats. Marlene looked at those treats and smiled. They were the same recipes she had made for years to earn a living. But now they had a new meaning. After the center was inaugurated, several women from the support group suggested that Marlene go back to making her homemade treats, not just as therapy, but as a business. Thus was born the Beads of Hope Community Kitchen, a small enterprise that produced artisanal baked goods and supplied them to cafes and bakeries in the region. The kitchen operated in Marlene's own house, which had been adapted for it. 5 women from the support group worked with her, all elderly women who needed extra income and a purpose. Together, they produced cakes, cookies, panettones, jams. Each product bore a label with the project's logo, a rosary with colorful beads. The name Beads of Hope was Gabriel's idea. He had said that each bead of Marlene's rosary represented a victory, a rebuilding, a renewed hope. And Marlene had loved the suggestion. During the celebration at the center, several people who had been helped over the past 6 months gave testimonies. Mrs. Tess, who had managed to leave the house where she suffered neglect, spoke about how the center had given her the strength to start over. Mr. George, the elderly man, who now lived alone, said that for the first time in years he felt respected and valued. A young woman, Camilla, 30 years old, also gave her testimony. She suffered psychological violence from her husband, who controlled and isolated her from friends and family. Through the center, Camilla received legal guidance, emotional support, and the courage to leave that relationship. She now lived with her sister, worked as a hairdresser, and was rebuilding her life. When it was Marlene's turn to speak, she went up to the small improvised stage. She looked at all those people, at the faces that were once marked by pain and now showed hope. When I knelt at that altar, collecting the beads of my rosary, I didn't know that moment would be the beginning of something bigger. I thought I was just picking up the pieces of my faith, of my dignity. But I was, in fact, planting seeds. Marlene paused, emotional. Every person here is one of those seeds. Every story of overcoming, every victory against abuse, every time someone chooses to speak instead of remaining silent, is a bead being added to the collective rosary we are building. And this rosary is strong, it is unbroken, because it is made of courage, of truth, of solidarity. The entire hall applauded. Marlene wiped away her tears and descended from the stage, being embraced by dozens of people. After the celebration, Marlene returned home. It was late afternoon and the sun was beginning to set. She went to the veranda, that same place where she used to sit when she still lived in silence, suffocated by oppression. But now, everything was different. The garden bed in the backyard was blooming again. Kale, chives, tomatoes, lettuce, all growing vigorously. Benedict had rebuilt it, but it was Marlene, who cared for the plants daily, with the same dedication as before. On the veranda, she sat in the rocking chair and picked up the rosary she always carried with her. It was not the same one that had broken at the altar. That one had been kept in a special box as a relic. This one was new, rebuilt bead by bead, with pieces of the old mixed with new beads she had chosen herself. Each bead had a story. The old ones brought memories of her mother, of a lifetime of prayers, of the suffering she had endured. The new ones represented new beginnings, victories, renewed hopes. Together they formed something unique and powerful. Benedict arrived to visit her, as he did every day. He carried a wrapped package in his hands. "Mother, I brought something for you." Marlene opened the package and found a framed photograph. It was the image of her kneeling at the church altar, collecting the rosary beads. Below the photo, a phrase: "When a woman refuses to be silenced, not even altars can protect the deceitful." Marlene looked at the photo for a long time. Then she looked at her son. "You know, Benedict, for a long time I was angry at this image. It was my moment of greatest humiliation, exposed for the whole world to see. But now I understand that it wasn't humiliation, it was liberation. It was the moment I chose to no longer bow before lies." Benedict knelt beside his mother's chair, holding her hand. "You taught me the most important thing in life, Mother. You taught me that forgiveness is possible, but that trust is rebuilt slowly, with actions and not with words. I am trying every day to be worthy of that trust again." Marlene squeezed her son's hand. "I know you are, my son, and I am proud to see your transformation. But always remember, never again allow anyone to be silenced in your presence. Never again choose the comfort of lies instead of the pain of truth." The two remained silent, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The Maplewood Heights neighborhood was quiet. Children played in the street. Neighbors chatted on the sidewalks. Life continued its normal course, but for Marlene, nothing was normal anymore. Everything was extraordinary. Every day of peace, every night without fear, every meal at her own table, every sincere hug, everything was a blessing. That night, before going to sleep, Marlene wrote in her diary something she had started doing after the events at the church. She wrote her reflections, her feelings, her prayers, and that day she wrote, "Today I completed 6 months of freedom. Freedom to live in my own home without fear. Freedom to speak without being silenced. Freedom to exist with dignity." And I realized that the greatest victory was not exposing Patricia's lies. The greatest victory was rebuilding myself, bead by bead, brick by brick, day by day. Because when you survive what you shouldn't have survived, when you get up after being knocked down so many times, when you collect the beads of your rosary and transform them into courage, you discover that you are stronger than you ever imagined. Marlene closed the diary and lay down. She held the rosary between her fingers and said her nightly prayer, giving thanks for blessings, asking for protection for all who still suffered in silence, and pleading for wisdom to continue being a voice for the voiceless. And as she slept, a peaceful smile spread across her face. Because finally, after so long, she was at peace, at home in her own home, where she always should have been. Dear listeners, we hope Marlene's story has deeply touched your hearts, just as it touched ours. This narrative reminds us that silence never protects victims, it only strengthens oppressors, and that one person's courage can inspire the transformation of many others. If Marlene's journey made you reflect, feel emotional, or even recognize similar situations in your own life, know that you are not alone. To continue experiencing intense emotions like this, we have a special playlist full of other incredible stories that explore life's challenges and victories. You can find it by clicking here. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps us continue bringing stories that matter, stories that make a difference. Every day we share unique narratives that show the complexity of the human experience, the strength that exists within each of us, and the hope that never completely fades. We look forward to seeing you in the comments. Tell us what you thought of Marlene's story. Share your own reflections or simply leave a word of encouragement. For anyone who might be going through difficult situations, until the next story,